holistic goal, which is quality of life, forms the production and future resource base. So it's an immediate, mid-term and long-term decision-making process. How do we want to lead our lives? What do we need to have in place to lead those lives? And what does our business, our family, our farm need to look like in 2 generations' time? So every decision you make leads you towards this holistic goal. We write the whole under management down because most of us don't know what we own, let alone the cattle on the property, but the subdivisions and where we can raise money if we need it. So then we have the ecosystem processes, which are the filter for the decision to make sure that every decision is environmentally sound. Now the ecosystem processes, because we as humans think in a linear format, we have divided it to a linear format for water cycle, mineral cycle, energy flow and community dynamics. Now all this is in the books, people. You don't need to write anything down. But if you want to, that's great, just to know how we are proceeding through the day. So this is the filter, but if you fiddle with one, you are fiddling with them all. But for terms of learning, we put them down as one wall in a square room, as being the water cycle, mineral cycle, energy flow, and community dynamics. Now, community dynamics sounds a complicated issue, but it's actually diversity. So what are we talking about here? If you have diversity in your sward of plants in a pasture, it means that you've got plants that are going to do well in dry weather, otherwise weather, medium weather, good weather, cold weather, warm weather. It doesn't matter what nature throws at you, you're going to have something grown. But the minute you start putting monocultures in, if you haven't got the right weather for that monoculture that year, you are in difficulty. I would like to say something harsher than that, but I won't. Because you have put a monoculture in there and you've got no flexibility and no stability. So keep that in mind. Then we've got the tools to manage the ecosystem processes. And those tools, the only new tools in holistic management compared to conventional thinking, are the tools of animal impact and grazing. Testing guidelines. We test each decision towards our holistic goal before we implement the decision. If it fails all the testing guidelines, all 7 of them, including common sense, you can still implement that decision, but you must know that it's probably going to fail. If it fails 1 of the 7, you can then assume that that is where you need to monitor the closest, because that is the first one that's going to fail. And the planning procedures, we've got financial planning, land planning, and grazing planning. And then we have got monitoring, which we monitor on an ongoing basis. And remember, I'll go back to the testing guidelines, which will enable you to emphasize where you need to monitor the closest. So that's basically what holistic management does to you. So it makes sure that every decision you make is socially sound, environmentally sound, and financially sound, because you have worked it through all the processes leading you to where you would like to be as an individual. So you as an individual have a holistic goal, a couple each have a holistic goal, and they form their holistic goal, and it might require a bit of facilitation because it's just a matter of words that are acceptable to individuals. Most of us want the same thing, but the way we express ourselves is normally different. So we test that decision towards a holistic goal and we achieve enormously. The problem is the whole. What is the whole? And unless you teach yourself to understand the whole, you are going to look and chase the silver bullet that is going to save you from all this disaster. And I promise you it's not going to work. So you need to understand the whole, because that disaster is only happening because you are looking at one part of it and not the whole. So in looking at the whole, there's the animal, there's the soil, the grazing, and animal performance. Now, without animal performance, you will go broke. So there's no point in going out there and trying to save the world doing holistic management, because you will be broke and you are unable then to save the world. I believe in saving the rancher who can then save the world. Now, if we've got a bunch of ranchers who are making an exceedingly lot of money, they will have the time and the inclination to involve themselves in society and promote our cause as people making a living off the land. And this is what we need to do. That's why I say you Americans have gone further than we have even, because you've got your farmers markets, etc. And you are educating the people in town as to where their food comes from and what is good and what is bad. We in our country are still regarded as the demons who created the problem of apartheid. So the quicker they get us off the farms, the better. So when you think about tsunamis hitting countries, we've already had the tsunami, and we're like a wet dog getting out of the water, shaking ourselves down, and we've learned ways and means of surviving. You guys haven't had the tsunami yet. So this is cuckoo land. It's all too easy here. I know you don't believe me, but it is. A lot easier than it is over there. So, okay, what are we going to be looking at then? In the animal, we've got anaerobic microbes, hair, saliva, dung, urine, and minerals. Now we know the animal needs minerals, but normally before man arrived it got its minerals from the grazing. But because of the way we have managed, we've destroyed the relationship between soil and grass and the microbes and life in the soil with the soil root surfaces, with the roots of the grass. And so you do not get the minerals in the grass. So I use a system of free choice minerals where an animal goes and takes just the mineral that is missing in the grass. She's a mobile laboratory. Every paddock is different. She knows better than we do, or the lab technicians, or the nutritionists. The nutritionist will mix you a mineral supplement. And remember that an excess is worse than a shortage, and as sure as anything for your particular farm, ranch, it'll be an excess of some mineral which is going to create more of a problem than if you did nothing at all. So understand what you're doing. But not only is she a mobile laboratory, she goes and sources the mineral that you require, but she then spreads it free of charge, because she consumes it, takes it, goes and urinates at the top of the closest mountain and all over the property, or dunging, and distributing for it. So you don't need a tractor because your animal does it for you. And gradually over time, you build up the fertility of your soil where you do not need to feed any minerals at all. But you should make them available, because some of those are going to the abattoir and you are exporting minerals off the property. Okay? So the higher your stock density, the quicker your minerals are going to reach saturation or the required level for that particular mineral. Now in Chem 101 you've got a circle with all the elements on the outside and arrows, so they're all linked. And this is why an excess is worse than a shortage, because if you've got an excess of, let's say, calcium, you can't take up phosphorus. And so it goes on. But you know all that. Okay. Then we have the soil. So we have aerobic microbes, we have anaerobic microbes. We have fungi, we have earthworms, and we have soil life. In fact, we have so much under the soil that I'm not going to put it all down here because I haven't got room. There is more life under the soil than above the soil. But because of the way we've managed, we have starved life in the soil, because there's only an animal that can get energy through the soil surface to the life in the soil. And our bunny huggers in town say that the cow is the worst thing that God ever created, and that you need to have land pristine with no dung pats on it. That land is deteriorating. That land, even in Virginia, will become a desert or such a thick forest that you get nothing out of it. So you can decide what you want as your landscape. You manage with what you have, you plan for what you want, you move it towards what you want. So if you just have forest, you can in 50 years' time have it as open grassland without bringing in a single saw, bulldozer, or poison, just with animals. But we'll come to that later. Any questions?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned about testing earlier, and my question as a beginning farmer looking at it, do you do any sort of soil testing through laboratories, or is it all purely from observation?
Observation is your best, but I've got to have a starting point. So I use Free Choice Enterprises in Wisconsin to test the leaf in my plant. Okay? And I send it to them, and they give me the oxygen, hydrogen, and protein value of that grass, carbon, and then every single element, what you require and what you have. And then you can take that and go and watch your cattle with that case of beer. And you'll see that they pretty well take to what he has written there. It's a very expensive machine.
You test the grass, not the soil. Not the... Okay.
Testing the soil, the chemical company, the fertilizer companies were very quick to realize that if they could control the testing of soil, they could sell a product. So they quickly gave farmers, ranchers, crop farmers, whatever, free testing advice, because they could sell a product. And you'll find that what they recommend is not what the cow tells you, or with what Mark will tell you. So it's an interesting scenario. Okay. Mark Bader is the guy in Wisconsin. So if you have the time and the inclination, and the other thing is bricks. Your bricks in this part of the world here is probably running in the region of 16, which is our best grazing in South Africa. But it's in a very, very brittle environment. So what happens, and let's just describe this in terms of what's happened at home. So that's what South Africa looks like, roughly. And we live here. Sorry, can you see behind me? I know I've got a bit of a big bulk here to see around. So we live there, and I did 3 hours drive here and 3 hours drive there. My bricks are 2. Now at 2 you shouldn't even be raising livestock. But why is it 2? But we'll come back to that. The bricks here are 10, and the bricks here are 16. This gets massive rain, this gets medium rain, and this gets virtually no rain, 8 to 11 inches. So what has happened? When we shot out all the wild animals, there weren't enough domesticated animals to eat the grass down or trample it down, so we had to use the tool of fire. So here there was lots of fire every year, and here there was half the fire that there was there, and here there's no fire. What's it done to the soil? It's killed the soil. We have purposely killed the soil, and yet there are universities that are promoting burning in South Africa every year, otherwise you cannot ranch your cattle. What's happening? So we have destroyed the soil because of fire. But I know once I got my stock density over a certain threshold, that changed from 2 to 10 in 1 year. Now what happened? I got carbon on the soil, I stimulated life on the soil. The money that came back, the investment that I put into that stock density was tenfold compared to putting it in the bank. So you need to get that carbon layer mattress on top of the soil. And below the soil, each time you graze that grass, your roots die back slightly and then grow deeper, die back slightly and grow deeper, and die back slightly and grow deeper. So you are forming a double mattress below the soil of carbon. And what does that carbon do? Every unit of carbon is holding 12 units of water. Why do we have droughts? We made the drought. They are man-made because of the way we manage. So we need to increase those bricks. So if I've gone from 2 to 10 in 1 year, just because of stock density, if I get to 16, the value of my grass, my land per hectare, is a 15th of what it is on this side. Now if I get it to 16 and I'm paying that for land, my investment per cow unit goes way down. What happened? Energy is money, money is energy, and oh my goodness, life is a ball. Think about it. Okay. In Canada, you've probably heard of Neil Dennis. His bricks is 26. His cattle don't even graze, they just stand in the grass and smell it.
I heard a lot of people asking around me, what is a brick? Could you explain that to some people?
It's the soluble content, it's the energy, the protein, and the minerals in the sap of the grass. And it's everything that grass needs to grow.
If you don't have enough animals, the grass is growing. What about just coming along and bush hogging, at least to drop the grass to keep the carbon instead of failing it to the wall? Just to grow.
The trouble with bush hogging it is energy source and use. So the energy you use it as finite, it's fossil fuel, it'll fail, and it's costing you money. And if you look at that equation, what you're getting from putting that bit of carbon on the ground and what you're spending is a negative. So rather just go and sell a bush hog and go and buy a few more cattle and manage it. So you make money, the soil does better, and the grass gets better.
How much variation do you experience in a year in terms of having too many cattle or too few cattle on your land?
It's massive because it depends on the weather.
So how often would you adjust the number of shares on your land?
Every month. So you are selling, you want to get yourself in a situation where you're selling every month, and so you're selling or you sell more or you buy in more, whatever you do. It's like shit. So what happens with the, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Bud Williams's sell-buy. Do any of you do the sell-buy? Basically what it's about is a triangle where you've got cattle, you've got money, and you've got feed. The more you move this in either direction, the more money you make. Because if you buy an animal and make 10% and you're selling it within 3, so you also need your cost of gain. So you buy an animal, you either put it in a group that looks good, you castrate it, a bunch of bulls that you bought, and you make them available for the feedlot. In other words, you alter what they are. You might put a bit of money into them and you sell it. So you're using your money, your feed, you bought the animal. The quicker you sell it and buy another animal, the more money you're going to make. Because if you make 10% 4 times a year, you all of a sudden make 40%. Well, 40% is a bit better than what the banks give you. So why not use this bank rather than the building in town? Where like Cyprus, you might have a hiccup and lose 40%. They've created a precedent, it can happen. Mugabe did it first and everybody says he's wrong. Cyprus have done it second, nobody said a word. Okay, so that is the sell-buy. You can be without cattle, but you must never be without money and feed. So in America, you've had a terrible drought, you've got no cattle, you've sold them all, you've got plenty of money and you've got plenty of feed. When's the time to buy? When the first rain has fallen. Because people are still selling and their pastures can't recover because they've had no animals on their farms or they've managed badly, you buy those animals. And then when the government gives them money to start restocking, you sell them. Any questions on that? So the grazing. So we need animal impact, and it was one of the things that I didn't mention about holistic management. It's animal impact, the animal and tool of grazing is the three tools that are required or new with holistic management. So the animal impact is, there are numerous ways of getting animal impact. And the first time I saw it was at Greg Judy's, where when I first got there, he had managed his pastures where they were rectangular paddocks and they had a walkway to water. And where these animals walked to water, they had annihilated the soil. It was just dust. There was no foliage. There was no living grass on that piece of soil. He apologized and said he was sorry about it, and I said, just relax. Next year, when it has recovered, put your cattle in, but don't put them in paddocks. Just put the cattle in and watch them. And he wrote back to me and he said, the animals went in, they sort of looked in the paddock a bit, the whole lot went to that area that was annihilated. It was this tall, and they sat there and grazed it into the ground, before they then went to the rest of the paddock and ate the top third. Now what's happening? The energy through the soil is feeding the critters in the soil, which in turn feed the grass. So that grass was very, very high in bricks because the energy had got through the soil, and it was through the animals walking on that soil that it created the energy, or got the energy through the soil surface. And I call that kinetic energy. The animals are walking on the soil. But the other thing is the animals were moving over in bunches to go to the water. And we've all seen this sort of energy, and I call it synergistic energy, where 1 + 1 does not equal 2, but it equals 5. And if you look at a big herd of animals in the late summer afternoon, it looks as though it's got an aura over it, sort of dust. And if you sit there long enough, all the birds are feeding in that dust. It's an energy field. Okay? The energy that's given off by each of those individual animals then becomes a collective energy. It does not stop at the soil surface, it goes below the soil, and it is feeding the critter below the soil. And the other form of getting energy through the soil, and this one we all know, is the action of grazing, where the animal puts its tongue around the plant, tears it, and there's a shock of energy that goes down the plant into the roots and excites all the critters. Okay. But what we do is we put animals in a paddock, and it's perpetually energy down every 5 days, and eventually the plant gets tired, and no more energy goes through, and we lose that species of grass. But if you put the energy in, and you give it a recovery period, which is flexible, you will capture more energy. Now remember, you are in the energy business, so you need your grass to maximize the amount of energy available from the sun on that square foot, yard, meter, whatever you like to call it. So you want to optimize the chlorophyll available to the sun at any one time. Okay. Bit of a long story. So we then allow the grass to grow tall because we're wanting more chlorophyll. And I think you Americans call it grazing tall. But you must be careful, because on your ongoing monitoring you also need to look into your soil at the soil surface. If you perpetually graze tall, your animals will go backwards because there will be too much protein and not enough energy. Your grass becomes sparse because the spacings on the soil get bigger. So you need to manage it in an area where the light is getting to the soil to improve the growth in those seedlings that are coming through in the soil. You put down the carbon, there's plenty of moisture, every seed is going to germinate. You created an environment at soil surface which is better than the environment above, foot above soil surface. There's moisture, there's warmth, there's minerals, everything's there, but you need light. So you've got to watch the light. Okay. The minerals we've spoken about free choice minerals, and we need to put down carbon. You heard me say that when I got to a specific stock density of animals, my bricks went from 2 to 10. Now that is because all of a sudden huge amounts of carbon were going onto the soil, and the critters on the soil, the osobacteria, eat exactly what the cow eats. They capture more nitrogen than you can put on, you can afford to put on the soil. And yet we kill them by the way we manage. We don't put down any carbon, we rake it all up, we put it in the bale, we expose the soil surface to the sun, the wind and the rain, and we wonder why we've got to buy everything. You don't need to buy any fertility, as long as you use the fertility that is God given. Just use it. But you can't use it without the carbon. And then you've got the oxygen-ethylene cycle, which when you tread down old dry grass, it creates a different bunch of aerobic microbes to get excited on the soil surface, but I'm not going to go into too much detail there. The action of grazing, we've spoken about that. About getting energy through the soil, the kinetic energy, the symbiotic energy, and the action of grazing. And then we look at energy. Now it is energy that controls life. So we've spoken about getting energy through the soil surface, but it is the energy component that is elusive. We are all told by the universities that it is the protein, but it is the energy that is elusive, and we need to manage to capture energy. Now what happens in a piece of grass? Maybe I should put it in green because it's a green piece of grass. At the top part of the grass is hydrogen, which is energy. Hydrogen is true energy. It sends rockets to the moon. Okay? It is not TDN. TDN is nothing. Hydrogen is energy. Okay? In between here we've got a lot of fiber and a bit of oxygen, etc. And down here we've got the protein. Now why we've got the protein down at the bottom? The reason is it needs